summary of it. If you could. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our virtual council meeting. And I would like to call this meeting to order. And we'll start with our mayor's report. Tonight we're welcoming Councillors Bagu, Bodner, Bruno, and Desmarais into the council chambers, and also our CAO Scott Louie, Clerk Amber Lapointe, Deputy Clerk Charlotte Madden, and a member of our WeeStream team are here at City Hall. Our other 4 city councillors and various city directors are each attending from home or their office. Niagara remains in stage 3 of the COVID-19 recovery process. You've seen the province roll back several regions to a modified stage 2. We do not want to go there. We emphasize the need for social distancing, hand washing, and face coverings where social distancing can't be maintained or where required by the region's face covering bylaw. We ask that you continue to support our local businesses, including restaurants. As we noted not too long ago, the patio season is coming to an end, and these businesses will need our support through takeout and limited eating in their restaurants. Ontario does have a new face covering rules. They've mandated it across the province. So the Ontario rules supersede the region of Niagara. However, our bylaws remains in place. So about face coverings and COVID-19. The best way to stop the spread of COVID-19 is by staying home and avoiding close contact with others outside of your household. When you do go out, you must use a face covering, non-medical mask such as a cloth mask, in public indoor spaces and whenever physical distancing is a challenge. This includes public spaces, for example inside stores, event spaces, entertainment facilities, and common areas in hotels. Workplaces, even those that are not open to the public, vehicles that operate as part of a business organization, including taxis and ride shares. Face coverings will not stop you from getting COVID-19, but may help protect others. Medical masks, surgical, medical, procedural face masks, and respirators like N95 masks should be reserved for use by healthcare workers and first responders. When you don't have to wear a face covering, there are some situations when you do not need to wear a face covering. You do not need medical documentation to support any of the exceptions below. Children do not have to wear a face covering indoors if they are younger than 2 years old. That is a change from the region's bylaw, where our bylaw stated 5 years old. So the province is anyone older than 2 must have a face mask. Under health and accommodations, you do not need to wear a face covering if you have a medical condition that inhibits your ability to wear a face covering, or are unable to put on or remove your face covering without help from someone else, are receiving accommodations according to the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act 2005 or the Human Rights Code. So that's new from the province of Ontario. Back in the region, starting next week, the region is moving to an every other week schedule for garbage pickup. For further information, there are 2 areas you can go to. The first is niagararegion.ca/waste, or the new app for your phone called Niagara Region Waste, which I downloaded today on my cell phone. It's actually got lots of great information. You type in your address and it gives you everything you need to know about where you live and when the garbage collection takes place. So how does this impact Port Colborne? Residents will not have garbage collection the week of October 19th. Garbage will be collected the week of October 26th, continuing on an every other week basis. So what will be collected the week of October 19th and weekly thereafter? So it will be your blue box, your gray box, your green bin, leaf and yard waste. And what you can put out bi-weekly starting October the 26th is garbage with a 2-bag or bin limit. We ask you to be a good neighbor next week, and if you notice your neighbor has put out their garbage, remind them of the new schedule. And if you need an additional blue, gray, or green bin, call our customer service representatives right here at City Hall at 905-835-2900 and set up a time to come to City Hall to purchase one. We are proceeding this year with our Mayor's Christmas Card Contest. This is a reminder that the deadline for our annual Christmas card coloring contest is Thursday, October 22nd. The contest is open to all children who live or go to school in Port Colborne, up to and including those in grade 8. Parents and grandparents, please encourage your children to participate. Submissions may be painted with fingers or brushes or drawn with pencils, crayons, pastels, or markers on a standard white sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11, in vertical or horizontal format. Remember that deep, dark colors produce a better illustration. Please include your child's name, address, and telephone number on the back of the artwork. It's funny, I was in Sunset Park today and a little fella came up to me in their school. He goes to Steel Street School and they're doing the Christmas card contest, so that was pretty cool. That happened to be Councillor Bruno's grandson who was telling me about that. So that's great. Our Meals on Wheels bottle drive is on Sunday, October the 18th. Meals on Wheels Port Colborne will be holding a bottle drive to raise funds to support their meal program. A drive-through collection will take place at the No Frills Plaza from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So clean up your garbage and bring your empties to the collection point next Sunday. Again, that's Sunday, October 18th at the No Frills Plaza from 10 to 5. Let's all support Meals on Wheels. Halloween. I wanted to get everyone thinking about Halloween even though it's 3 weeks away. Mind you, the candy's been in the stores probably for the last month and a half. We've received these guidelines from the province as well. The region of Niagara is following these. Stay home if you're feeling ill or if you have mild symptoms. Only go out with members of your direct household. Only trick or treat outside. Both trick-or-treaters and people handing out candy should wear a mask covering. A costume mask is not a suitable mask to wear for your face covering and should not be worn over a face covering as it may make it difficult to breathe. Consider building your face covering into you or your child's costume. Do not congregate or linger at doorsteps. Line up 2 meters apart if waiting. Avoid high-touch surfaces and objects. Whether collecting or handing out treats, wash your hands often and thoroughly or use hand sanitizer. Do not leave treats in a bucket or bowl for children to grab. Consider using tongs or other similar tools to hand out treats. Parents will need to make a personal decision about participating this year. But if you do participate, please do it safely, and we will also continue to update the public if any new information occurs or changes are made by the province. In closing, we ask for your patience while we all continue to work together for a safe and gradual return to services. We must remain vigilant in fighting this virus, and our number one priority is the health and safety of our staff and citizens as we continue the safe and gradual reopening of services and businesses across Port Colborne and Niagara. And please stay safe. Any questions?
You put an extension number with that so they can get directed immediately?
That'll go to our CSRs, and they'll make the arrangement for the public to come in, because they look after the bins at the front counter for them. So it'll come, that number 835-2900 goes directly to our customer service representatives. Okay? So it'll go, yeah. So you'll get a preamble. If you do know the extension, you can, if you're not calling about this, but then the phone goes directly to a live voice, and that person will take your order and make arrangements for you to come in. Okay, Councillor? Perfect, thank you. Seeing no other questions, at this time I'll call on Regional Councillor Barbara Butters for her report from the region. Barb, welcome.
Hi everyone, glad to see you, glad to be here. Hope you all had a good Thanksgiving weekend with your families, as limited as we all were by COVID this year. Made it a very different kind of situation. Mr. Mayor, you've well covered the province mandated masks as well as the garbage pickup, which I think is kind of like the big news this week. So I will just give you a quick update on the COVID cases. There are 1,214 confirmed cases in Niagara, and 1,050 are resolved, and still 65 deaths. So how important it is wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance, and stay home as much as you possibly can. And the other thing I just wanted to remind people of is don't forget the time to buy your poppy is coming up towards the end of October. Legion members will not be standing outside of businesses this year because of COVID, but they will have the poppy boxes inside, and that's where you can get your poppy and support veterans for Remembrance Day. It's going to be very different this year. There won't be a large gathering as what we have been used to, but the Legion's working at planning a live stream setup so that people will be able to watch on TV. And so I'm sure that there's more information to come on that. This week, the standing committees meet. Today was Public Works and Public Health and Social Services, and tomorrow is Corporate and Planning. And then the following week on the Thursday will be the Regional Council meeting. So with that, that's it for now. And if you have any questions, be glad to take them down and get back to you with an answer.
Great, Barb. Thank you very much. Councillors, anybody have a question for the regional councillor? Seeing none, again, welcome back from your little vacation there, Barb. And,
thank you. It was really nice.
Good. And we'll see you at the region, if not before.
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you. Madam Clerk, any addendum items this evening?
There are none this evening.
Thank you. Confirmation of the agenda. If I can have Councillors Bodner, Councillor Bagu to move this. All those in favor of the agenda, please raise your hand. That's carried unanimously. Disclosures of interest. I have one disclosure this evening with item 4. Councillor Beauregard, any further items of conflicts of interest? Seeing none, and Councillor Beauregard's conflict is with regards to the firm he works for, did work on that item. Okay. Adoption of minutes. I have 2 sets of minutes this evening. Special meeting of Council 25-20 held on September the 28th, 2020. Regular meeting of Council 26-20 held on September 28th, 2020. If I can have Councillor Wells and Councillor Danch move that. Are there any questions to either of those minutes? Seeing none, raise your hand, please, if you're in favor. Okay, that's carried unanimously. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. I have items 1, 3, 4, and 5. Anything further? Thank you. If I can ask Councillor Beauregard and Councillor Clayliff to approve the items not requiring separate discussion. All those in favor, please raise their hand. That's carried unanimously. There are no delegations or presentations this evening. Councillors' items. Staff responses to previous councillor inquiries. The 3 staff members here, do you have anything for council? Nothing? Online, Mr. Aquilina, do you have anything?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I do. Council will recall the September 28th public meeting dealing with the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. And for those councilors that did not declare a conflict, there was some discussion regarding regional policies to address the aquifer within the city of Port Colborne. And I had indicated that the region was embarking on policies as part of their environmental work program. So today I had the confirmation from regional staff that is overseeing those draft environmental policies, but they did indicate that what I had mentioned at the September 28th council meeting was in fact factual, that they will be embarking on the aquifer for the city of Port Colborne. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Dan. Any other staff members? Steve Shapowski.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 quick items. At the last council meeting, Councillor Bagu requested a change to the Meadow Heights subdivision agreement. This included alterations to the tree planting list to include only native trees within the development. I've since spoken with our director of planning, and he'll be bringing forward the final version of the subdivision agreement to council. So we'll be including these changes at that time. As a second item, I'm sure most of council is aware that we've experienced some multiple water mains over the last week. The Niagara region has been completing an inspection on the interior of the water tower, and as part of that, part of the warranty period. So pressure through the system has been supplied through the field and reservoir. This work has caused differences in the pressure that the system typically sees and has pointed out a few weak spots in our distribution system. Although we don't expect a significant amount of further breaks, we are continuing to monitor the system and will respond to any further breaks accordingly.
Good. Thank you, Steve. Any other staff members? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to start in the room this evening. I'm going to start with my right, councillors. Councillor Desmarais, any questions to staff?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have nothing tonight.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I have a couple thank yous and a question. Thank you to, through you to Steve for working on some, I guess, a last minute, quickly assembled request to look at Erie, Minto Street, where they've had 8 water breaks in the last 2 years, to see if there's something we can do in the interim. Steve, thank you for that, and look forward to your report on that. I also wanted to thank you for dealing with 2 streetlight requests at the west end of Barrack Road down into the marsh. And as far as a question for Steve, I received a request from a citizen who is legally blind, has a guide dog, and was wondering about, in some municipalities, there's apparently a module that goes on the walk and stop signals and countdown clock at various major intersections where those, and apparently what it does is it sends out some kind of a chirping noise, and to the individual they're able to tell if the walk is in a north-south direction or an east-west direction. And I'm wondering if you could let me know, or all of us know, either tonight or in the future, whether that's a module that we have on those walk lights and we're just not utilizing it, if it's an add-on, and any other pertinent information you may know about that. I'm sorry I didn't get to you today to ask you that question.
Steve?
Yeah, through you, your worship, to Councillor Bruno. It's something I can definitely look at. You're absolutely correct. There are those systems that take place, and there is chirping. Just it's an audible sound to let people know that they're, to know exactly what direction they're walking in, timelines, how fast they can travel across the roadway. What I can do is I can look at all the intersections within the city and then come back to you with what each intersection has. And then I can also look at some costs too, if we don't have them in specific intersections, to see how we can implement a program going forward, if that's how council chooses to proceed.
Thank you very much. And the other question.
Oh, just on that, Steve, can you also contact the region? Only because most of our main street is their road, so if they're responsible for those, just to see how many they may have or may not have, and that might be something that Councillor Butters and I will have to take to the region. Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the other question, I'm not sure if it, and I didn't get a chance to speak to anyone at planning or bylaw today. It's about the notices that had gone out with respect to trailers in front yards. And so I'm not sure who to direct that to, if that's a planning issue or a bylaw.
Mrs. Hanson should take that one.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So then it would be to Mr. Aquilina.
Okay, great. Dan, I recall that bylaw being instituted originally back in 2000, I'm going to say 8, and it's worked well on boat trailers and house trailers. We expanded it to include the seasonality of that. I mean, there's no reason why somebody who takes their boat home and then pulls it out on Thursday needs to take it to storage and then back. So the bylaw worked well and resolved the issue of the day from April 15th to October 15th. where people are in flux with their boat and their RV. I wasn't aware at the time, because it wasn't an issue. And smaller utility trailers have the kind you can rent at Home Depot, or the single axle one for, hauling a wheelbarrow full of dirt or that type of thing. They're pretty low rise, pretty small. They're not a cube trailer or, a float. So I'm just wondering on that, if the only complaint, well, actually, I shouldn't say the only complaint, but up until today, I had one complaint, and the lady really had what amounted to a single axle, 3-foot high, kind of 4x8 floor in it, the steel kind that you see, that you can actually pick up with your hand and move around. That apparently is in the bylaw, and I don't know in the responses whether we've had a lot of people who were notified that, they fit the bylaw, and all of a sudden we're getting the notification. I certainly know from my time when it was adopted that wasn't the direction or the problem of the day. Well, whether it has since 2010, when I was last on council, to now, or whether it's been amended, I'm not really sure. But I'm just wondering if you have, or can find out if you have a sense of, if a lot of those issues were utility trailers, perhaps that's an area we could augment to fit today's situations with those. I'd like to see at least an exemption for the small ones that aren't really growing in the driveway, like a trailer or old boat, aren't visibly a blockade or a wall between lots, and obviously they can go in rear yards. So I'm wondering if that could be addressed, if you could come back with some kind of a report, if we could amend for small utility trailers. I would really want to limit that to the small size ones. I don't know enough about them to know whether there's various degrees of them, whether there's various degrees that then it needs a license plate. But right now I'm thinking single axle and a minimum height. So I'm just throwing that out there. Have you had any responses in your office or in bylaw to that issue as part of the trailer bylaw in front yards?
Mr. Aquilina?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Bruno. On October the 1st, bylaw enforcement sent out a letter to all the property owners that have a trailer, utility trailer, anything on our zoning bylaw that would be in violation. So the letter stated that, please remove your trailer by the 15th of October. But Mr. Bruno, if the property is in violation of the bylaw, those owners of property would have received that letter. Now, if the council wants to discuss further about the bylaw itself, there'll be something that council would need to provide direction on, because you are correct. That bylaw was changed back in 2010 to address giving occupation or actual storage of trailers, RVs, and the like based on a certain period of time of the year. And our bylaw actually spells out that time and month requirements. So again, if council wants to provide direction as to what you would like to have as a council, then I would need to have that direction.
Councillor?
Thank you, Dan. I'm just wondering, do you have any numbers or rough numbers on how many notices were sent out?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruno, no, I do not, but I can get that information to council and advise you of what that number actually is.
That would be helpful. In terms of the item that I wish to address, which is fairly narrow, I'm only concerned about this being, what, the 13th, and the 15th being a deadline, and I'm concerned about those small utility trailers. But I really would like to have some information. Can people who have those utility trailers, can they ask for an extension, or would it, because I understand that that can be granted, or would it be more appropriate to ask council here for a moratorium on the utility trailers till we deal with it?
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruno, with anything in bylaw enforcement, we like to work with the property owner that is in violation before we lay down the heavy hammer. So anyone that is in violation can work with bylaw staff. The deadline is the 15th, but like I mentioned, staff will work with the property owners to gain compliance. Or the other option that any property owner can apply for is through the variance process to the Committee of Adjustment to get some sort of relief as to the location of a trailer on the property, because it's within the zoning bylaw, and that is a responsibility of the Committee of Adjustment if they'd like to deal and handle and approve those applications. Or if council as a whole wants to provide direction, again, with any change in the actual bylaw itself, that can be done through council direction to review a report and then provide the direction as to what you as the council would like to do.
May I suggest you do that, Councillor?
Yes. From my standpoint, I'd like to, on the utility trailer, suspend that enforcement of October 15th. If staff could come back with a report with respect to a reasonable, I guess, in order to configure, at least on this narrow issue, the right size, I need a little more information. So I'm not prepared to throw out a number or a length and a height tonight. So if I could, Mr. Mayor, if you could help me with it, so that what we're saying is that we could suspend the utility trailer issue for another 2 weeks, and Mr. Aquilina, could you come back with some information on utility trailers or other examples in other communities by that time, in terms of a time constraint?
Well, Mr. Aquilina, would this be possible, because it is a very narrow parameter that the councilor is asking for. Just looking at our calendar here, could something be done by the November 23rd meeting?
November the 23rd, Mr. Mayor?
Correct.
I would think that is reasonable time for staff to bring something back to council.
I think it's a very minor adjustment to that bylaw with regards to a very small utility trailer. Yeah, if you can work with Councillor Bruno and your staff on this to have it come back for the 23rd, then our bylaws know that going out, that if somebody does make a complaint, that we can talk to the person that's in violation, just state that there is a change coming forward at the 23rd. If council passes that, then you'd be fine, because we probably can give our staff a pretty good idea of how small this is. It's not a huge trailer. So, because I know what the councilor's talking about. You don't want the big float trailers, big large trailers, which is how this bylaw started. So if that's fine with council, to have staff come back with that, is that consensus of council? Is that fine? I see everybody nodding. Everybody's okay with that? Okay. Well, why don't you do that now? Because we're talking, let's stay on the same subject.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to see, there's an exemption granted to boats and in the summer when people are using them. Well, how about snowmobiles when you use them all winter? We don't have that in there, and I got a call from somebody that was caught up in that. They have their snowmobiles ready to go up north, and they're told they got to move that trailer. So I'd like that worked in somehow to see how we could do that, same as boats, but snowmobiles in the winter time when they may be using them each weekend or something like that.
Okay, Mr. Akulinic, is that something you can add to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. One thing I would do like to remind council that any change in the bylaw, because it's within the zoning bylaw, would require a zoning application, public meeting, and the whole bit, because it is a planning act application requirement. But if there's something that, oh,
Oh, you still there?
yes, I'm here, Mr. Mayor. Sorry about that. Cut out there. What I was saying is that because this is a bylaw matter, any change in the bylaw requires a public meeting under the Planning Act and consideration of council to council before any changes are made. If council wants to provide some direction as to put a hold on some enforcement of the zoning bylaw, that is something that can be entertained, but to go further to make changes to the bylaw, that is a public process before any of those changes can actually be made and put in place. So I would just
Okay.
like to remind council of that as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bodnar?
I think that's a reasonable request because this is just happening and there may be things we haven't even thought of yet. So rather than go forward with something and give it a little bit of time to flush out as to what's going on. I'm good with if Councillor Bruno wants to change his thing to, to delay it until we get the full story here.
Yep, okay.
And I think I'll talk about some other things on that when it comes to me, but it
Okay.
won't be to change anything
Okay,
necessarily.
good. Councillor Bruno?
Well, maybe through you to Councillor, but I don't mind, I guess adding on what I got out of it, and I certainly think there's merit to, the original bylaw back then accommodated, the boating season, right, and the RV season. I think to do that for a snowmobile trailer is fair ball too, for the winter months. So you're looking to keep that narrow as well to the snowmobile issue?
I think there may be something, like if it's a full-blown public meeting, zoning bylaw change, why don't we just take a breath and wait for a month or something and see, because I can tell you that the 2 phone calls I had Monday night while I was having supper, they just received it on Monday, delivered by a bylaw officer on a holiday Monday, so that's something I'll talk about, but anyways, so they just got it. So maybe there's 50 other people that just got it. And maybe there's 2 things we didn't think of in that whole thing. So I don't want to see us go ahead with something and then, oops, gee, now we got another thing that we didn't think of. So can we take a breath and just,
Because it's not
Wait
coming
for a
back to
while.
the end of November, so
all right,
should,
and
according to
if
the
that's
staff, we
fine,
should have
then-
lots of time.
sure.
But I think what Councillor Bruno is saying is that with regards to boats and RVs, those still carry on.
Right.
With the October 15th date, we're not
That's what I was
making any
asking,
changes to
yeah.
those. It's literally snowmobile trailers and small utility trailers. So any large float trailers and things like that aren't gonna be, you gotta have it gone by the 15th or moved onto your property where it's appropriate based on the information staff provided.
By the 15th, even though you only got the notice on Monday. And it's sitting in a wooden crate.
Yeah, just a sec, Mr. CAO?
Sure, through your worship, to council, I wanted to sort of touch on a couple of things. I had a couple of things to chime in on. I think taking a breath is a great idea as it pertains, as Councillor Bonner said, as it pertains to any kind of amendments to the bylaw moving forward. I don't want to box staff in too much right now by debating the staff report. That's not even before council yet.
Sure.
So I think staff has a good idea of what changes council would like to see and can bring that back in November, and we can put the wheels in motion for public meetings and a formal change. And I would suggest if there's more than just that, maybe an email between the council member and the staff member to sort of say, hey, I'd also like you to consider. And then what we'll end up with is staff's opinion and staff's recommendation and a council decision to either go along with that recommendation or amend it and sort of set parameters. I want to go back farther. Councillor Bodner just mentioned it. This note, just to be clear, at least this is my understanding, this note that was hand delivered to a variety of residents was not on any kind of a targeted basis other than it was a friendly, we had hoped, gentle, we had hoped, reminder. If we saw a boat, a camper, or so on in your driveway as a courtesy to you, we were going to remind you that the bylaw existed. This was a kinder, gentler bylaw enforcement division telling people before coming down with the full weight of the bylaw that this better be moved, that hey, this exists and it's coming on October 15th. Some people probably took it as a directed complaint against them, and it certainly was not that. The timing, whether you got it a week or 2 weeks ago or a few days ago, I mean, it was still a courtesy. A late courtesy, I guess, is still a courtesy in staff's opinion. And then the third thing is we probably missed some people. There are probably some folks out there who just through the normal course of business we didn't drive by, and they are in this situation. So this wasn't meant to cause a bit of a stir in the community, and it appears that it has in some parts of the community, but we're really looking to just inform people and get the word out there that winter is coming and some of these uses are not permitted once you get past that October 15th deadline. So friendlier, kinder sort of bylaw enforcement tactic that we're seeing if it will work or not work. We will continue to work, as the director said, and to Councillor Bruno's point, we always work for voluntary compliance. I don't foresee us having people in court over small utility trailers, snowmobile trailers, and so on. So I think maybe if we just sort of take pause here, I can get both the actual enforcement on October 15th and council's desired amendments back before you before the end of November.
Councillors online, any comments with regards to Councillor Bruno and Bodner's comments? Nothing? Okay. Councillor Baggy on that vein?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've had one person that have a trailer up north, and they closed up and they brought the boat home, and they like to do perch fishing, and as most fishermen in Park Colborne know, the fall fishing for perch is very good in Park Colborne, and through the month of October even, until the weather gets really bad. And they called me and I talked to Bylaw, and Bylaw is 100% great. They're willing to work with these people. He's stated he is having somebody come to his actual house to do winterizing on a certain date. Then it's going in storage on a certain date. And Bylaw was more than receptive of taking care of that situation. So I want to thank Bylaw for doing a couple people that I know taking care of them. Like we're not here with a heavy-handed sledgehammer. So that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. So Mr. Aquilina, I guess through you and our CAO, you've got a handle on everything, and so we're okay for the end of November then?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Any further comments on this? Okay. All right, you're done, Councillor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Clayla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just through you to Bylaw as well. I, along with Councillor Bagu, had a few people calling me, but everyone was pretty understanding. They just wanted to know that this was happening to everyone on the city. It wasn't being targeted, and I made it very clear that it was happening throughout the city. I heard it from a few more people today, but I also had people calling into Bylaw, telling them that Bylaw would work with them, and they were very pleased to hear that. And I know that some of them did get exemptions for certain things with storage and different things like that. So I think that Bylaw really did a good job as far as working with people and making them realize that these are just things that have to happen throughout the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bagu. Items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one, probably for Madam Clerk, she seems to know everything that's going on in City Hall. So basically, I just want to know the status of the new city website.
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, we are still on our target date of January 2021 for implementation for go live date. So staff have just recently completed the hardest part of the implementation, which is a complete overhaul of every single web page on the website. So staff from every department have been doing that over the last 2 months, I believe. Now they're working on a new business directory, so getting that up and running, and all of the different aspects for the different pages, but we're still on target for January.
Councillor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just back to the trailer issue. The CAO was correct. This was a kinder, gentler letter that went out. I was impressed. I thought it was right on. It wasn't get it out and explain things. Probably a number of councillors have said it, and Mr. Agolina said it too, that just call by law and work with them. That might have been alluded to in the letter, but maybe next time it will be, give us a call, we'll tell you what your problem is, and is it, you gotta move it 2 feet back, or do you gotta move it 30 feet back? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
people don't know, they just get this and think, oh my God, and the other thing is, the 3 people that called me said that the notice was delivered on Monday by a bylaw officer. Monday being, it would take it time and a half. I hope we didn't call a bylaw officer and do this. Is that?
I wouldn't know. CAO? I don't think we did, but that's CAO.
Sure, and I'm not sure if Director Aquilina has the answer. I don't. It's the first I heard of it. My initial advice from staff was that we were going to drop these off on an as sort of noticed basis in our usual travels, that this wasn't going to be any kind of special trips out. That if you were going down to Pleasant Beach to check parking spots and you saw one along the Pleasant Beach Road, you would pull in and drop one off in the mailbox or some appropriate place for it, but it would be in the normal course of business. We do have bylaw officers on duty on statutory holidays, usually a smaller crew, unless it's a parking, Canada Day and so on. We sometimes put more on for parking and so on, but I can't say for sure, and I'd like a chance to look into it unless Dan knows right off the top of his head.
Mr. Aquilina?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bodnar, no, I am not aware. But if council wants some answers, I can get those to council as to what staff were on and for how many hours.
Okay, Councillor. So it could have been in their normal duties that they were.
Absolutely, and that's what I kind of alluded to the people that called me, but I didn't have that information right there. And if we decide to do kind of a blitz of the city again on something, can you let the councilors know? Maybe I missed the memo. But,
that's my fault, Councillor.
Okay.
That's my fault. I
Didn't want to
apologize.
say that directly, Mr. Mayor, but
No.
I knew you'd step up and say
Yeah,
it.
no,
So.
that is my fault. I had all intentions. I did get busy,
Yeah.
and that's why you got a memo today with regards to the letter and the mapping that staff had given. And
Sure.
and I had spoken to a few councillors that I happened to be in City Hall last week about it, but that is my fault. Because as everybody knows, it is a complaint basis, and I received 6 complaints directly. And I approached staff, and we talked about this, and they felt this was the best avenue to go. And I said, yep, education's probably the best way to go, as opposed to what some of you councillors said is coming down with a sledgehammer or a big stick. So, but I do apologize, Councillor.
Apology accepted.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. One other thing, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Steve, if he's still there. I know you sent me an email on what the Highway 3 detour, when it may be done. Can you share that with everyone and just let us know if you have that in your head?
Steve?
Yeah, through you, your worship, to Councillor Bodnar. They're still working currently on Highway 3. There is plans to reopening Highway 3 at the end of this month. So we're looking at it approximately 2 more weeks, and then it'll be open again.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't have any items until I got a phone call this morning. The phone call was something that I'd like to address with Steve, if possible, through you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Steve, I've had some concerns raised regarding the access gates to both Pleasant Beach and Wildwood. The current access gates do not go all the way to the property lines on either side, and there's a lot of off-road vehicles going around the gates and entering onto the beach areas. And it was the question was posed to me is, can we extend the access gates to the property fence lines?
Steve?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Wells. I actually have a meeting out on Pleasant Beach this week, so I can run out there and I'll have a look at each road end to see what the issues are. As you're all aware, we are doing a lake end road study right now, which will take that into consideration. But for the time being, we can start to look at a temporary measure just to ensure that four-wheelers or dirt bikes aren't crossing into that area. So leave it with me and I'll look into it and we'll see if we can come up with a temporary solution for the time being.
Councillor?
Thanks, Steve. Mr. Mayor, I have one other item I'd like to raise, and it's not to anybody, but I'd like to make notice that I would be a notice of motion for the next council meeting regarding the aquifer being designated as a source water for the city of Port Colborne, the rural portion of Port Colborne. I know Dan has been speaking with the region, and it's been a little bit vague in regards to what their policies are going to be or how those policies are going to affect the aquifer and the drinking water for the rural side of Port Colborne. To ensure that that is considered within their policies, I think it would be advantageous for the city to designate that or to consider that as a designated source of drinking water for Port Colborne.
Okay.
And that's all I have.
You'll bring that at next meeting, Councillor?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll be back at next meeting. Perfect. In the meantime, please reach out to both our planning, or Dan, and CAO with regards to wording for that, just so we know it's in the proper vein, because we need to, I believe, Mr. CEO, we need to approach the region on part of that. Yeah. So please reach out to Scott and Dan on that, just so that when we go to the region, we've got the proper wording.
Absolutely. I could reach out to my contacts at the region as well.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Danch.
Yeah, thanks for that. Just one item tonight, if I go through Mr. Mayor to Steve there. 867 Barrack Road, got a street light that's down the bottom there by Fay Farms and whatnot. It's been out for months. Can we maybe get the road crews to get that on the list, please, and see if they could light that thing up again for us?
Yeah, through you, your worship, to Councillor Danch. We currently have it on our list right now. We were in discussions with Councillor Bruno actually about this a little earlier, and we are looking at it as on our list, and our contractor is actually going to be meeting us out on site within the next week to get things orchestrated and going. So that will happen, yes.
Thank you, because when I go and get my pizza, it's nice to not get heck again, right? Thank you.
Councillor Beauregard, any items?
No, I have no items this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Clayla.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, through you, it was actually about Halloween. Thank you for addressing it. I've had some calls from some concerned people, and you touched on everything. So I hope we can have some kind of media go out on our participate page or the website, and I'll advise people that you will be updating that. So thank you for bringing that piece out. And my second piece I'd like to talk about is the fact I had the opportunity today to speak with the district commander for 6th District with Staff Sergeant Rom DeGidio, and it was regarding the excessive motor vehicle muffler noise in our community. I know that a couple of the other municipalities have addressed this, Niagara-on-the-Lake and Niagara Falls, and I was speaking with him about it, and he's aware that we have it as well. I've talked with many people and councillors alike regarding it. So I was very pleased that he told me that he will address it. And he said that he's going to ask his officers to add loud mufflers, altered and modified mufflers to their enforcement actions from this point forward. And he's going to put it on the Twitter account that we have, the one that with 6 Niagara Regional Police Twitter account. And he will advise people that they're enforcing the equipment violations along with educational pieces as well, will be involved in that. And he said for 2021, he plans to add it to the district initiatives going forward so that it can be addressed. And it will go out on their social media to advise the residents of their actions. So I'm hoping that this is something that everyone will be happy to hear. I was very pleased that he looked at it very seriously, very quickly, and came up with a solution that he thought would work and take us towards addressing some of these vehicles.
Good.
And I think that's it for me.
Good. Thank you, Councillor.
And
our communication staff will be in full force with regards to Halloween on our social media and things like that. So.
Thank you. And could I just once again, I really want to encourage people, I've been telling all the councillors as well as anyone I talk with, they really need to look at Twitter. You don't have to join Twitter. You just have to look up, just Google Twitter, the number 6, NRPS, and it will come up as 6th District, which is our area, and they will see everything that's going on in Colborne, Wainfleet, over Crystal Beach and Ridgeway, as far as our area and what's happening as far as initiatives, what the police are doing, things that are happening. And I think it's been an excellent site. I've been able to direct a lot of people to it, and they're quite pleased to see what's going on in our area. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Just to Councillor Kalila through the chair. Regarding Halloween, the community emergency management staff have been discussing for a number of weeks about Halloween, and there will be a region-wide approach to Halloween. So just as the mayor said, the communication staff are on top of it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amber. I did tell the people that I was talking with to keep an eye out. I would let them know, but I was sure there would be some things coming out from the city. And I said that, again, it all comes down to personally what you want to do and children being out. Some people were concerned because, as you all know, we often have big carloads of kids from the country coming in, and people were quite concerned about that. So I said that I was sure that there would be some direction coming out from you.
Okay, good, thanks. On to consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Item number 1, Planning and Development Department Building Division Report 2020-126. Subject, request for reduction of building permit fees for South Niagara Gateway Family Homes, 340 Wellington Street. This is moved by Councillor Clayliff, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. Councillor Clayliff, you had a question on this?
Actually, I didn't realize that Mr. Schultz was going to be speaking to it, so I think that he probably can answer the questions that I had. I just wanted a bit more of an explanation about it so that the general public could understand what was really happening here.
Great, thank you, Councillor, and yes, we do. Our delegation tonight is Mark Schultz from Schultz Engineering. Good evening, Mark, how are you?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you tonight. As you know, I'm principal of Schultz Engineering. I'm co-consultant on a project at 340 Wellington Street on the corner of Wellington and Highway 3 on the east side of the canal, along with Paul Jeffs, a masonry consultant from Guelph. We were first involved with the building, looking at the brick. There was some falling brick. We thought there was a bit of, some sort of minor repairs. But as we got into, we had some brick removed, discovered that a lot of brick that looked good were actually crumbling from the back. You have the project really snowballed. It's social housing. It's a nonprofit building with geared to income rents and market rents in combination. All of the costs, the rent for the building is covering the costs. It doesn't make any money for anybody. And the building's only 30 years old. This was quite concerning to discover how bad it was. We got pricing on replacing the brick. It was just out of reach. And then we changed the design to pre-finished steel cladding. I didn't have the pleasure, you have my letter requesting the fee reduction. I didn't have the pleasure of reading Mr. Rogers' report until today. So that's really going to shorten my presentation because I think he covered everything beautifully. We're asking for a reduction in fees because we think it is reasonable. It's fees are intended to cover the costs of the building department. We think that what we've proposed is sufficient to do that. And we think that municipalities, everybody likes to talk about supporting social housing. This is an easy way for you to do it, to make a good gesture that doesn't actually cost the city any money. I mean, this is taking money from a place that doesn't have it. They've borrowed the money. It's financed through the region to pay for these repairs. As I said, the building's only 30 years old. They have reserves for repairs, but totally unanticipated something of this size. So I think it would be a wonderful gesture on your part to help the social housing in Port Colborne this way. And I'd be happy to answer your any questions.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Clayliff, did you have any questions?
No, I didn't, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Schultz. You answered everything I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors online, any questions? Councillor Danch?
Hi, Mark. Long time no see.
Yes, how are you doing, Frank?
Good. Hey, through Mr. Mayor, of course, Mark, isn't this the second time they've done that building? Like maybe 10 years ago, they pulled a bunch of brick off that and redid it, and now they've had to go back and do it again?
Mark?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, there have been some previous repairs. I wasn't involved then, so I don't know exactly when, but there were some repairs to bricks. As I said, when we first got involved, which was actually 2017, it was because there were bricks that the faces were falling off. It was visible deterioration. This was on some high areas around the 5th floor, up just below the roof, which is where the previous repairs were done. We, as I said, when we started taking bricks out to replace them, we discovered that the ones that the faces are coming off are the ones that have gotten really bad. And a very large number were deteriorating on the back, but not visible yet on the surface. It's because the moisture is coming out through the wall. There were defects. It wasn't a very good design, and it was very poorly constructed. There's a lot of warm, moist air coming out through the walls, which has been remedied with our new system with the spray foam and whatnot. But what I would say I'm quite sure is the case, when the bricks were repaired before, they did the ones that they saw without knowing that there were a lot more that were soon going to show up as the deterioration progressed.
Councillor Danch?
Well, I went by it, I think it was Monday afternoon, and it certainly looks good, and hopefully this repair lasts and the guys don't have to go back and spend that kind of money on that building again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Online, any further questions? Councillor Borgard, Councillor Wells, nothing? Councillor Bodnar, anything? Councillor Bagu? Council? No? Okay. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. So we do have a motion moved and seconded. Please raise your hand, all those in favor. That is carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. Next we have item number 3, Corporate Services Department Financial Services Report 2020-144, subject reserve and reserve fund policy. There was an error in the, not in the body of the, well, in a little bit in the body, but in the motion itself. So staff have given me the motion to read that the reserve and reserve fund policy attached as Appendix A to Corporate Services Report 2020-144 be amended to change infrastructure reserve to general TCA reserve, and that the reserve and reserve fund policy attached as Appendix A to Corporate Services Report 2020-144 be amended to add Godrich Maintenance Reserve in brackets W with a purpose of a working reserve to accumulate unallocated Godrich maintenance funding between fiscal years and a primary source of funding as Godrich maintenance agreement with third party, and that the reserve and reserve fund policy attached as Appendix A to Corporate Services Report 2020-144 be approved as amended, and that the reserves and reserve funds be consolidated as outlined in Appendix B and C. That is moved by Councillors Bagu and Bodnar. Questions? I'll start with Councillor Bagu.
I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Yourselves? Okay. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I guess, Mr. Bowles. So I'm just concerned of how this affects the Niagara Regional Broadband Network Reserve Fund. There's a lot of money in there, and at least 3 of us were there and kind of gave birth to this thing, and it was one of the best things that Councillor Steele at the time and Bruno brought this back from a conference, the concept anyways, and a lot of us worked hard and thought it was a great idea and pushed to get it going. So now that we've divested ourselves of that to a nice profit, I would say.
I would say.
So Mr. Bowles, can you tell us as of today how much, or close to it, how much money is actually in that reserve, and how the world will change for that reserve if we adopt this policy tonight?
Mr. Bowles?
Yeah, through the mayor, I appreciate the question, and first and foremost, just to reiterate the fantastic job that NRBN investment did for the city. I think in the report we outline the number of places that it may go, and I'm just looking up here exactly. I think it's just about $6 million that was included in that reserve come the beginning of this year. And what staff, after reviewing it, I guess would identify or suggest to council is fantastic reserve, fantastic investment. But then the question becomes, the reserve is in all respects a source of funds. It was an investment that produced a source of funds for the city to then decide what to do with that source of funds. If council decides to leave the reserve in place and leave that as a future use for council's wishes, it can. Staff has put forward that upon review of a number of reserves, including the working capital reserve, the infrastructure reserve, the city's stabilization reserve, and after considering some of the future liabilities that we have contractual obligations for, that we could use that reserve and allocate it across those functions, still fully with council's requirement and approval required to move forward to spend those reserves. But we could fully fund ourselves to ensure the sustainability of the city with respect to these other reserve requirements. I don't know if that's enough to answer your question, but maybe it's a start.
Councillor Bodnar?
Sure. So then over time, okay, so take future liabilities, general stabilization fund. That money will be eaten up for sure and used for the purposes of these funds. I guess I want to see what, it's not a bad idea, but maybe I'm just hopeful, was always hopeful that something would be there in the Niagara Regional Broadband Network money, kind of, for lack of a better word, forever interest used to, do good things for the city. And this just seems like it's now, although it's going to very good use, it will be gone, and that's it, that's all. And that's life, and that's life in the city, and that does happen, but I want some good feeling on when I vote for this that, you know, that explanation is good, and it's good with all the other councillors in the room. So I'll wait to hear what other people may or may not have to say, and then I might have something else to say, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Next I had Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Brian. Brian, I applaud you in working hard and diligently at these policies. I think they'll definitely form the framework for the city going forward. With regards to this one here, sometimes we don't always recognize the benefits to the taxpayers. Can you maybe just explain what benefits the taxpayers will see from these policies?
Brian?
Yeah, so through the mayor, I think an example is really hopefully the transparency that comes out about city finances. We have over 100 reserves presently. The goal here in the consolidation is really to take many and consolidate into the power of maybe a couple or fewer reserves. The policy here suggests that we'd get down to 39 from over 100. That will assist us to report on them regularly on a trimester reporting system. So both council and the public can see where we sit financially, both in our short and long-term goals and our funding capabilities. I think another benefit, and maybe this also helps a bit with the NRB and reserve discussion, is by ensuring we have a strong policy around our working capital, which really is the day-to-day funding of the city, or tax rate stabilization reserve. It identifies that we've taken great strides to ensure the sustainability and the ability to meet any issues that may come up for the city. And in doing that, we also can project that confidence if we do need to go out and borrow additional dollars by indicating to anybody that we need to borrow funds from that we indeed have a strong financial plan and we have our financial liabilities covered. When we think of the NRBN reserve right now, it does sit there as an opportunity for us to do that. By allocating it, it just maybe helps put that exclamation point to show that we have identified what needs to be covered and we have covered. So I guess I would put to council that by bringing this reserve forward to the citizens of the city, the hope is that by having fewer reserves, we can do a better job of reporting to you as citizens, reporting to you as council, so you can actively manage and utilize the reserves when you need to for important projects for the city.
Councillor Wells?
Thank you. That answered my question.
Thank you. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. I was so glad Councillor Bodner brought this up, and I think he made an eloquent attempt at, and maybe it's because those of us that might have been here and nurtured that and it provided such a great return are maybe glued to it a little more than anybody else. And I appreciate those that even might not be. One of the things, though, that, I mean, I think the story behind Port Colborne Fiber's investment into NRBN, though, had a story behind it the night we presented the check for, I think, what was then $7.2 million. There was still some issues, things that had to be paid down, costs that we incurred, finder's fees, legal fees, et cetera, et cetera. And that was this, is at the time we made that investment, we were able to be quite bullish because we were getting $180,000 a month on our hydro lease. So that initial investment in NRBN was $325,000. When you're making $180,000 a month and it's not on the levy and the taxpayer isn't paying for it and you get a golden opportunity, I commend the council of the day, but I'd have to say it was a much easier dive to ask for 325 with a business case analysis, without going to the levy, without going to budget, without stealing from another reserve, and we were able to do it. So that 325, then with an addition 3 or 4 years later when we bought out the commercial side, because we had somebody doing it, I won't get into the details, brought in more money, and there was an ask for an extra $400,000. Again, pretty easy, given not only the results of NRBN for those first couple years, but the pro forma on what our 400,000 would be. Concurrently with that, before we sold our share, the 325 and the 400 had come back to us in dividend checks in the ensuing 7 years till we got to the 10-year anniversary, which allowed us to sell. Why I tell that story is because, you know, I looked, obviously we couldn't go to a convention last year, but I've been looking for other, and I'm sure other councillors are, NRBN-like opportunities. And I'll never forget the night that we talked about the initiatives surrounding the cruise port and monies that might have to be invested. And it was Councillor Desmarais and I just sort of talking here on the side about, you know, wouldn't it be wonderful that those that see the cruise ship initiative as something that's not great, or those that say it is great, but imagine if you could invest in something without going to the taxpayer, that may be an entity that actually produces dollars or produces this great growth, and again, is not a risk out of the levy or out of the budget. And I think that was like just a super appropriate use of that NRBN money, to leverage, to do something outside the box that, yes, might have some associated risk to it, but also had an upside potential and was never going to really break the bank with what we had. So I think, you know, if tomorrow morning, if we pass this and it goes into this general reserve, I think if tomorrow morning an opportunity came around to find another NRBN, I think it might be a pretty heavy lift to take even a moderate risk that was, because obviously we had triple net tenants with the mush sector and all that kind of good stuff. You know, I wonder if today, without putting some of this money aside as, I guess I'll call it an enterprise fund now, you know, it solves some of the reserve issues that Brian was talking about. Maybe it's there so we don't do the intermittent borrowing. Not that I guess that's caused us enough on the line of credit. I think it was 15,000, Brian said last year. But I would be satisfied if we could put part of that 6 million plus. And by the way, on that, I thought 725 or 750 was coming back to us in this third year, and maybe that's in Brian's 6 million. Because you remember there was the issue on our first budget of we were funding the $30,000 for the Port Colborne fund. We're now doing that out of the levy, 10, 10, and 10. So I don't know. I'm hoping that 6 million is 6, 7, 25. But whatever it is, I think we ought to have, you know, we created something significant by thinking outside the box and not using taxpayer dollars, notwithstanding that it all is taxpayer dollars, but not out of the tax rate. And we did something pretty special, and it paid off spectacular. I don't want to close the door to that opportunity happening again. So, you know, I don't know if we have to think this through tonight on the number, but I think it'd be nice if we had, you know, 2 million of that set aside for an opportunity fund, an enterprise fund, for things that we think can take us in a different direction, make money for the city, which just like this, I mean, we'd be plowing back 4 million of that 6 million. And I think that satisfies the aspect of we created new money and now we're going to put it towards good projects. But we've also held something back for, I think this council, and with the addition of Mr. Bowles, would look at any opportunity every which way but Thursdays to secure it was a secure thing. I think as a municipality, we don't want to take undue risks and get into necessarily, some high flyer risk. But I think if we had that money, it's going to make this council and the next council, I think it's going to give us some latitude to do some unique things. So I would put forward a motion that we reserve $2 million, and let's see how that goes. I mean, it's always still the city's money. The council of the day and at the moment can collapse that and do what we want to do, but I think being cognizant of it now, and I thank you, Councillor Bodnar, for bringing that up, I think it could fulfill both ends of this spectrum. Some towards a reserve, some for an opportunity fund. So I don't know if it's appropriate to put that forward as a motion. There may still be some discussion on what I've said and some discussion on the whole policy. So that's all for now, Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, I'm going to take that as an amendment to the motion. And Councillor Bodnar, do you want to second that? Okay. Mr. Bowles, do you have a comment on what Councillor Bruno has proposed?
Yeah, sure. Through yourself, two comments. I think in planning this, the thought was the stabilization reserve could be used as that mechanism. That said, if council decides to go in this direction, I would just recommend that you fund that $2 million, and we can reduce the future liability reserve and use that to establish the opportunity fund.
Is that all right with you? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bowles. Any questions on the amendment? Councillor Danch?
It's nice that we bring up great dollar amounts, like this, but I think if you guys are playing the game, you got that kind of money, you can access that at any time. And I don't think we need to set it off to the side. If you guys have it in your term deposits or whatever you guys call it, if Brian needs to cut a check, I'm sure he could find the funds to do that. I don't know if we need to set aside $2 million. I think some thinking and a little bit more reporting on this is needed, but that's my opinion. Thank you.
So, Councillor, just to clarify, it's money that's already set aside. So of the NRBN money that's been allocated to several reserves, he's going to back that off a little bit, or if this passes, and that there be an enterprise reserve. It's still part of all that reserve money. So we're in the same boat as we were. It's just that the council, whether it's this council or future councils down the road, if an opportunity arises, they know they do have a reserve that they can use for investing. So that's that. And I understand what you're saying. We could leave it in the other reserves, and if we need to gather a bunch from a bunch of different reserves to do that, I'm sure Mr. Bowles can do it at that time. But I think what Councillor Bruno is stating is that that is dedicated at this time. We know that $2 million is there, and if we need, like in the day when we did, I think it was $240,000 was our first check for NRBN, it would come out of that account, and it pays for that investment. So it's doing what you're saying. It's just that it's taking that money and allocating it to a specific use, as opposed to spreading it even more through the other reserves. But it's still in the reserves. Okay. Councillor Colborne.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Bowles. Mr. Bowles, you're saying that if we stay with what you've proposed, the money is still there. It's just that it comes, we're not going to miss an opportunity. If there comes an opportunity that we think is a good investment, the money will be there. You can get it. There's not any difficulty with that. But in the meantime, this money, this $2 million would go to, would it be saving us money in any other ways by where you would have allocated it now?
Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor, the funds will be there should council need to invest in as Bruno identified, if council and staff were to put forward a project of significant consequence that was going to be fantastic for the city, the funds will be there, and we can pull those from a stabilization reserve. Should we need additional funds, the working capital reserve or other reserves could be adjusted. And I appreciate the mayor, I think, tried to articulate that as well. As staff, I'll put forward that the opportunity fund is absolutely fine should council wish to go in that direction. We'll just adjust how much we transacted into the other reserve. So over time, we'll have to save more in the future liability reserve, which is absolutely, council's decision if that's the way we want to go. In the short term, there's no real impact, as I think the mayor and other councillors have identified. The funds are still in the account. This is just identifying to staff and yourselves as councillors what is in there and what the priorities are.
Councillor?
Obviously, when I ask if it's your recommendation, you're recommending doing what you've said. You would prefer to go the way that you've recommended. You will go the way that Councillor Bruno is putting forward, if that's our wish. But if it were to be done the way that you wanted, you would have us do with what you're recommending.
Mr. Bowles?
I can assume.
Through the mayor, I would have you do as recommended in this report. If a business idea comes up, the funds can be pulled from the stabilization reserve. If need be, council has the ability to adjust any of its reserves if need be.
Thank you. I trust your judgment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you. Through to the point of Councillor Danch and Councillor Clayliff, I think that it is much, I think it's not only easier, but I think future councils would feel that, again, it's a lot more pliable to do that $2 million into the enterprise fund for the following reason. At any given moment, without notice, a councillor can raise, because of financial issues, the motion to extinguish the enterprise reserve and use it for whatever purpose it can. I have to tell you, I think that's a much easier go than someday saying, we'd like to take $2 million out of your stabilization fund and fund this project. I think I think it's a lot more difficult, and I think it's a lot it's a lot more trying to do that at the time. You first have to count on the council of the day, and so let's think beyond these next 2 years. I think it's a lot more pliable, it's a lot more difficult to retell this story and why you should allocate those funds than it ever will be. I mean, perfect example, like the first meeting or two of this new council, I'd asked, and it was recommended that we take the $775,000 that was sitting in an account earning less than 2% out of that fund to fund the Port Colborne Community Fund by only putting $10,000 for the next 2 years into the levy, release the $775,000, and make it more comparable to the wishes of the day. I hate to go at this for the second time, but you know, the story is the story that if money is sitting in that enterprise account and you want to get it, you still have to come up with the business case. You still have to convince enough people around this table. The Brian Bowles of the world have to give their blessing, but it's there. So if you're concerned about I just think it, to me, it's, I think it puts forward us as a entrepreneurial thinking council without taking any risk to put that money aside for this. And if our financial situation gets bad, if there's another reason to use that money, if we don't have money to leverage the fund, it's same night, same vote, can move that 2,000. But I just ask you, as being part of a group that was able to leverage it, that it's a lot easier if it's carved out in that reserve. So I don't know if that's sufficient for Councillor Califf or Danch, but I think you can get what you want at any given time. And let's let the situation dictate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Online councillors, any further questions to the amendment? Seeing none, anyone in here? Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you. I'd just like to echo what Councillor Bruno was saying. It would make more sense to have that actually earmarked for that type of project. It'd be a little easier go, I think, than trying to dive into. It would be more easily understood, I think, by the public and councillors of the day that may wish to enact that fund. So I think that's the only reason that it would make a lot of sense to be separate and in that type of fund.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Mr. Bowles?
Just, if I could just, through yourself, the mayor, just to identify to council, from my perspective, the proposal of the Opportunity Fund from a staff's perspective is absolutely okay and supported if council decides to go that way. It has equally as, probably as many benefits as the proposal put forward in this.
Oh, we lost your sound.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that from a staff perspective, the proposal of the Opportunity Fund is equally, I think, as beneficial to the future of the city as having the, I think, the reserves established in the way the report was put forward. So from staff's perspective, I just want council to recognize that the Opportunity Fund is fully supported if that's the direction, and it has many benefits that may not have been considered in its entirety in the report. It may actually improve the report and the reserve.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bowles. And no further questions. So this is a question, calling the question on the amendment only. Please raise your hand if you're in favor. Please raise your hand if you're opposed. And that vote is carried. Thank you. Now back to the main motion as amended. Any further questions on this report? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried unanimously. Okay, item four. Item four is being brought forward for the conflict for Councillor Beauregard. Corporate Services Department Financial Services Division Report 2020-145. Subject: Niagara South Coast Tourism Association bylaws. I have Councillor Bagu, Councillor Califf moving this. Any questions on this one aside from the conflict? Although, oh, sorry, Councillor Wells?
This is with regards to item number 4, correct, Mayor?
Item 4, yes, for the South Coast Tourism. There's a
Yep,
conflict
I have 2 questions that probably Mr. Bowles could answer.
Certainly.
The first.
Oh, there you go.
The first question is, how many board members would be on the board?
Mr. Bowles?
Through the mayor, presently there's four, being the CAO, myself, Councillor Bodnar, and the mayor. Council approved those board members as an administrative board, I'm going to say 3 months ago, roughly.
Councillor?
Thank you. That answered my second question, which was how they, the city would select the board members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, no further questions. Again, noting the conflict. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. Item number 5, memorandum of understanding regarding Hamilton Oshawa Port Authority. I have movers Councillor Bruno and Councillor Clayliff. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Just so anybody doesn't have to remind me of apologizing next week, I should have been more diligent at looking at this memorandum of understanding and getting some questions answered earlier this week. So my apologies for bringing this up at the last moment, Mr. Mayor and Council. So having looked at this memorandum of understanding, I think we have all heard numerous times that this is not binding and that further discussions will be happening and things can get changed. Having said that, though, a memorandum of understanding does want to send a signal, and it does want to convey working together. And as always, the devil is in the details, and those details were and been described to us as follows. However, when I re-looked at, well, first of all, before looking at the memorandum of understanding, when I think about what this is about with the two other municipalities, Thorold and Welland, I don't think it's a stretch to say that in that consortium, we are the crown jewel. And I believe that when you end up with an agreement, if we don't come at this, discussion surrounding these surplus Transport Canada lands, that Port Colborne's ultimate needs and desires may best be presented as a memorandum of understanding with the Port of Port Colborne because of our uniqueness to this. I don't think, and I think I'd be more worried if somebody told me why that can't happen, because if it's non-binding, then the Port of Port Colborne, whether it's tonight or in a future iteration of a memorandum of understanding, can still come to the table with HOPA and work to move forward. So now let me get into the memorandum itself. What struck me was in the third paragraph, and I'll read this and divide it into two parts if I could. The Niagara Ports hubs would incorporate several properties along the Welland Canal that have been declared surplus by Transport Canada. So let's put that into perspective. It's not the Seaway lands, it's the Transport Canada lands. So, HOPA can have a deal with the Seaway. Any other entity that's current or future could have a deal with the Seaway. So this speaks to those lands. I believe that, and I'm hoping others will, and I've had some discussions with some councillors on this, that Port Colborne, let's look at the land adjacent to Nickel Beach. I would want us to singularly take the opportunity to go after lands that we may want, that part in particular, so that it doesn't become part of this larger group and potentially then trying to access it. But when you look at the next sentence, it says, with the endorsement of each municipal council, the MOU formalizes a request by the 3 municipalities and HOPA that the federal government incorporate its surplus canal lands into HOPA's letters patent. You know, as I read that already, it's more than a memorandum of understanding. It is actually, as I read it, an action item that says, with this endorsement by municipal councils, basically the 3 municipalities in HOPA can ask the federal government to incorporate its surplus lands into HOPA's letters of patent. So one is, I looked up HOPA's letters patent, and quite frankly, it's, as it probably should be, a 2001 legal document with a lot of definitions and clauses and issues for which I can say I'm not prepared to make a call or have the ability, the knowledge to look at that. I think that's a lawyer's thing. I really didn't realize in earlier discussions that why this incorporates into the surplus canal lands into HOPA's letters patent. I don't understand what that means, that it conforms to their letters patent. You know, again, to reverse and simplify this, I want, as Port Colborne, a shot at those lands first. I would like to get that out of the way and then look, because I think there is merit to memorandums of understanding, and I think there may be merit to partnering with HOPA, and I think there may be merit to going in with the other municipalities. But I certainly would have liked to have seen the principals in HOPA make a presentation to us, and I'll leave that to the clerk and those that have been close to the negotiations, whether that be an in-camera or a public discussion. But I'm not prepared to ask for those lands under an umbrella group when I haven't had a shot at asking to buy them on our own and do what we want to do with them. And then if we can do an agreement with our lands along Ramey Road in the canal, this land that I'm discussing right now, or any other properties that we may acquire that have waterfront. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, they did an amalgamation with Oshawa. Oshawa already had a port authority. I'm assuming they already had the lands that they wanted. I'm also assuming that, you know, before they did the deal with the Hamilton Port Authority, that they could have extracted the lands they wanted, parked them here and say, okay, here's what we've got to go with this. Again, I'm not critical of this ultimately being a great thing for Port Colborne. But at this time, I would like, you know, there's more questions I have that perhaps should have been asked earlier. But I think we need to own any of those lands that we want to own first, and then we go to HOPA and say, here's our lands that we'd love to put into this marketing mix, this ability. And while I understand that it could be said we can do that later, I believe that the way to go about this is not to move now on this and I think it's a lot easier to not start till we get a little more information than it is to back out or try and negotiate while we're in this letter of understanding. Again, if it was a standalone MOU with just Port Colborne, and we could put some conditions in it, that one condition be that we isolate the lands we want to buy, because I worry about a lot of things. You know, this reminds me of what, for some, if you look at the whole landfill situation in Niagara, you know, a lot of municipalities joined up and we merged that, and it was under one entity, and it's worked. But you know what? Grimsby cut its own deal. And there's a lot of benefits to that deal that they signed down there. It didn't preclude them from being part of the Niagara Region Waste Management site. It didn't preclude them from having that. But they carved out their own deal first and then went into the consortium. I can't think of any other examples that come to mind right now. But, you know, there are issues that, again, I think we need some legal advice on what this letter's patent is and what it means. But more importantly, you know, I don't need the group to speak for Port Colborne to buy surplus lands. And I would much prefer coming to a memorandum of understanding when Port Colborne's able to sit down with the current HOPA and explain its concerns, and that we can get comfort on those concerns, and then we could go ahead with the MOU. So I would be proposing, but I'm not going to say the refer word right now, that because I think other councillors are due an opportunity to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
CAO, do you have anything to add?
Sure.
Councillor?
Through your worship to Councillor Bruno, I appreciate the commentary on this issue. I had trouble following with where you first said which paragraph. You said the third paragraph?
This was in their press release.
Press release.
September
I'm sorry.
25th.
I'm looking at the
I beg your pardon. I'm sorry.
So item 5 in the council agenda, looking at page 58, the very top, it says the parties endorse a request to the Minister of Transport of Canada that the lands identified in appendixes A, B, and C. Now those appendices are the subject of an in-camera discussion, and we decided not to attach them to this public agenda, be included within the Schedule B of the HOPA letters patent, which is a document that we don't, it's a public document. Yep. You said you've reviewed the letters patent. I've reviewed the letters patent, but I haven't seen Schedule B with my own 2 eyes as required to realize the Niagara Ports multimodal hub vision for each of the 3 communities. I'm wondering, I'm not a lawyer, and without having seen Schedule B with my own 2 eyes, I can't say for sure that Schedule B isn't sort of defining the territory in which HOPA operates. So I'm not making a promise to you, but what I'm hoping is that sort of says, okay, Hamilton Oshawa Port Authority operates in this area in Hamilton, this area in Oshawa, and the request here is that we'll also operate in this area in Niagara, rather than be the first tier purchaser of some land in Thorold, Welland, or Port Colborne that is subject to sale to the municipality. I agree with the council member that I don't want to lose our spot in line to be the eventual acquisition, you know.
People that acquire it.
Yeah, the eventual party that's going to make the acquisition of the subject lands. So this is one small part of the memorandum of understanding. We are subject to a non-disclosure agreement with them as it pertains to sharing information about particular corporations that might be lured to the future port in Niagara as it evolves. But I think what this agreement is looking for is we have lands that are either municipally owned, privately held, federally or Seaway Authority owned, and we know for a fact, I think this is okay to say publicly, that Hamilton Port Authority is at its boundaries, if not very close, they're all the way out at their boundaries. So when you know, a metal, you know, like a steel mill comes along, a sugar mill comes along, a grain terminal or so on comes along, they have to turn them away. The Hamilton Port Authority is turning them away from their current geographic limitations. And so we want the lands in Niagara we want them to be the administrators of the land that's in Niagara, but not necessarily the owners. It doesn't hurt us if they're the owners, if they were able to acquire property in Niagara at an arm's length transaction from a private developer. We want to be the masters of our own destiny as it comes to acquiring federal land, and we will bring that to council, and we might say, hey, the city doesn't want to acquire this, we want to defer to HOPA here, or we might say as a council, you might decide and vote that we do want to acquire something. I can take that back and make sure that's clarified. So this is where I get in trouble. This was the subject of an in-camera meeting. The direction at the time was to execute the agreement. This agreement has been executed. I guess that wasn't me. I guess that was council that did that, so I'm not in trouble. But what I can go back to the executive director of the Port Authority and make sure that we're all on the same page and that there's a good understanding that Port Colborne can be the master of our own destiny when it comes to acquiring government-owned land, COA-owned land, and so on, as a sort of a first right of refusal before it becomes for sale to the general public or to the private sector. And I think that we've always had that hierarchy of land becoming available and going to a different federal division, and then to a provincial division, and then to the municipality, which could be the region or the city. We're both municipalities that are equal. It's not a 1-2 punch. So we want to preserve that right, even under a new arrangement or under a new memorandum of understanding. So why don't I take that away as staff direction and report back as soon as I have an answer at a future council meeting?
Yeah, Schedule B is not, it's a federal term with regards to federal lands that maybe have liabilities tied to it.
Yeah.
So you actually don't purchase the land. It can be leased, but it can only be leased through a Schedule B, which only HOPA can do. Like in this case, HOPA would be HOPA. I suppose if you picked ABC Ports Company, but HOPA being the one that operates in Oshawa, Hamilton, and we want them here in Niagara, we can't do a Schedule B. The city of Port Colborne can't do it under federal rules, but HOPA can. And what that brings is future dollars from a fund that's about $850 million a year that the federal government puts aside for ports across Canada. So HOPA would come down and say, okay, we've got a project in Port Colborne that's worth $20 million. We now lease this piece of property that's under Schedule B. We want to extend a dock, make a wall, bring in rail. They can grab a portion of the $850 million where we can't. We can't acquire anything out of that. So if they said 20 million, the government would give them 10. HOPA in this case would put their 10 in and do the project. And that's what Schedule Bs are, but they're leased property, they're not owned. So that's what that talks about under their letters patent, because that only pertains to port operators across the country. So hopefully that dispels some of the things that you said, because it's not every piece of property. CAO is correct. If there is a chunk of land out there that we want, we'll buy it and we can say to HOPA, operate it. Or they may say, we don't have anything that can go on that because it's not close enough to the canal, because we do know that the Transport Canada has lands that really aren't marine related, but we may want to purchase them for other development across the city. So, Councillor.
Actually, it doesn't, because I'm aware of what the ultimate benefit of an association with HOPA could be, and I'm aware of the funds that they can access. Having said that, why I prefer the MOE with just Port Colborne, and why I would hope that HOPA could come and speak to us, would be to answer this. It's why I would like the legal opinion on it. And I guess further to that is, what I've seen in, there's there's other lands in Port Colborne, in the inner harbor, that potentially, I mean, we haven't seen if there's, so let's take let's use an example, a Ramey Road land, right? So if a developer wanted to come in there and said, you know what, I want to build this great logistics company there, and I can see that I could get access to the canal there, you know what, I could also bring you some other people. That door, once you get into HOPA, is you've relinquished that latitude. And so this isn't about HOPA not being a great partner. This is about HOPA being, at this stage, potentially the only partner. And so I'd like to hear from them as to what, because this is potentially a once in a lifetime situation. I mean, if we go through with HOPA, those lands in our agreement, unless it's with the term, which I looked at the Oshawa agreement and it's not, it's sort of if you want to get married, you're married. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with everything being on the table and we making a wide-eyed decision on it. But right now, like, I don't want to get into a situation where, my potential partner wants to use surplus land, say at the mouth of the canal, for all the reasons we know and the great benefit it is, for a laydown area and, 2 crane operators and 100 trucks a day banging down Welland Avenue, or going down Welland Avenue, which is in conflict with potentially the sense of arrival and the vision of Nickel Beach or its extension. And so I know we're not there by doing this in that. But I also want HOPA to know that they're not the only game in town. This isn't just a slam bam done deal. And because it's a nice shiny object and we can use it, I still want to explore deeper this whole letters patent issue and subrogating to it. But back to the MOU. When that line says, with the endorsement of each municipal council, the MOE formalizes a request by the 3 municipalities and HOPA that the federal government incorporate its surplus canal lands into HOPA's letters patent. To me, that's more than the ability to access that grant money, which of course I would love, but at the end of the day, this is an action item that says, federal government, consolidate this land, and the 3 municipalities and HOPA want to be able to have at it. I want to be able to have at it first, and I know that's repeating where you're going, Scott, and thank you for that comment. I just want to, personally, I want to refer this and get more information. I don't see how a couple weeks would make a difference, because I think there's too much at stake here, even in consolidating the ask.
Just point of order, Councillor. This has already been passed. We've done this in camera. This is brought forward because it was in camera for the public's knowledge. I have no issue with bringing Mr. Hamilton in to speak to us, but it will be in camera because there will be properties discussed that can't be discussed publicly. But this has passed. So we've signed our memorandum of understanding, but you're reading off a news report and not reading off the memorandum.
It's their release.
Councillor, I know it's their release, but read what's in the memorandum. It talks about Schedule B properties, which is totally different than what you said. I think that's just for, it's more in a layman's term the way they've laid it out, but in the actual memorandum it talks about Schedule B property, which has a lot of caveats attached to it when you're dealing with the federal government. That's what they're talking about there. However, this isn't binding on any of us, and we can go out and purchase land if we want. The whole idea is to get on board with the Niagara Trade Corridor, have a port authority that's across Niagara, that works together and not in silos. Yes, Port Colborne is, I mean, you are separate because you're separate municipalities. We're not asking Welland or Thorold to come into Port Colborne and say yes or no if we're going to purchase property. That's our decision. But what we're saying is that we need a port operator that knows what the hell they're doing to operate this. And if you've got somebody that's in Oshawa, Hamilton, and now Niagara, you've got the golden triangle of Port Authority. And you know, they like Port Colborne because they're operating, they can potentially operate out of Port Colborne 12 months a year. And there is a call for more icebreakers located at this end, but the U.S. is building more icebreakers for the other end of the lake. But let us bring Mr. Hamilton down. I think he'll answer a number of your questions, and we can actually also include our MP, who's heavily involved in this. And in fact, he's the chair of the Transportation Committee in Ottawa, and he was one of the catalysts to bring this forward. This isn't something new. This is something we've talked about under Mayor Badaway, Mayor Bodner, Mayor Maloney, and now Mayor Steele, and it's coming to fruition. And I mean, we can sit and stare at that land for another 40 years, Councillor, but I mean, you know, for us to move forward with opportunities, you know, going back to the last issue we talked about, that entrepreneurial fund, I mean, an opportunity comes forward, we're glad that that's there. So if something we can do within the city of Port Colborne to help augment tax base, then let's do it. But let's bring in HOPA, let's bring in the MP. I think we can do that at a meeting, and I think it'll answer a lot of your questions.
Okay, I just want to make one comment.
Yeah.
I think for you to conflate that we would be standing still and stare at the land for the next 40 years is certainly nothing that you could gather from my comments on this. That's not where I'm going, never have been, never would be. But I think that I'm just concerned that this is, and again, apologize for not bringing up further. And my interpretation was that we were, it's on the council agenda that we were passing it tonight, and that's my opinion. My opinion is not to not pursue this. It's about that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do thank everybody for clarifying that this has already been done, because when I read it, I thought, wait a minute, I'm having a Groundhog Day moment. But I did remember that we had given this direction, and I had to look at the picture to see where you had signed it, so that was done. My concern does shadow some of what Councillor Bruno has said, but I'm really looking at the impact on Ward 2, because Ward 2 will take the greatest impact from anything we do with HOPA. There's no question there. And I want to make sure that we get the greatest benefit of it as well. So I really do want to hear more. I think that council now needs to be more plugged in. We need more information. We have to be, hooked into this all the way. It can't be just a 1 or 2 person show now. Really important, because when the announcement was made, I did get a lot of people reaching out and asking about it. And I've got to say, generally, people were really in favor of this. And I can see untold benefit that can come from this. But again, the people in Ward 2 had that, yeah, this is great, but what about us? And I understand why they would say that, because the impacts can be terrible, but they can also be great. So let's go to the table and talk a little bit more about this. I really do think that we all need to have more understanding of it, and how this is not just looking at the large, at the longer views of pieces of property, but how are we going to put things in place? How are they going to be implemented in a way that it is going to have the best benefit for the people living in the area? So.
Well, one thing is getting traffic off Welland Street.
That's one, but let's show how that will happen.
Yeah.
People need to see. It's fine for us to just say, yeah, it's going to work. It's going to work for you. They need to see how it's going to work. So it's time to start putting some of the pieces in place.
No, that's right, and that's where this memorandum can start this. I mean, that's really
absolutely
the first block in a whole wall here that we're building. So, but through the CAO and through Mr. Long, who does our special projects at this time, we'll, Scott and I could deal with Gary tomorrow to have, both Ian Hamilton and Vance at an in-camera meeting with regards to this. Sure. Okay?
I guess looking for direction for staff, for your worship, is do we want to pass this tonight and make a commitment to have a closed session meeting? Or do we want to refer this to staff? Won't use the D word, because I know that changes things at the meeting. But if we want to refer this back for a visit or a Zoom meeting, we are planning on having a closed session meeting at our next council meeting. And if schedules permit, and I can arrange it, we can have.
Or it can be an off Monday.
Right. So is that the,
Well,
I guess, I would need a motion from a council member to refer it. Or we could approve it, but have staff direction to arrange the delegation.
Well, we're actually approving what we've already approved.
Approved, yeah. But it's
Not
on the agenda as
approved.
item 7,
Chime in
so
here?
item 5.
Yeah.
In the closed session, it was approved by council to direct staff to bring this into open session for approval. So the vote was to approve it in spirit, but the actual formal approval needs to happen in open.
Okay, that's fine.
If I can, Mr. Mayor, I think at this point, as much as I would like to maybe see more discussion in a council setting, I really don't think you can not pass this. It's been done. We've given direction. It's gone forward. The media blast has happened. The mayor has signed the documents. It's done. What do you want to do at this point? I can't imagine not doing it, but I do want to have further discussion without a doubt.
Oh, and this will be, there'll be lots of discussion moving forward. Councillors online, any questions? Nothing? Okay, Councillor Bruno?
Well, I was going to ask for the clerk's interpretation of it, but the clerk's interpretation of it is you could do that. She says it's brought forward tonight for endorsement. What was your word, Amber? I'm sorry.
I believe I said for approval, for official approval.
Right. So the motion, so you've heard from the clerk, but the motion also says for the mayor's signature. That's in the motion. That's in the staff report. So is the deal done without your signature? Or does the signature make the deal? We've got the clerk saying it could be deferred. You got the CAO asking if it could be that way and then sign it. We've got the staff report that says to be signed by the mayor. So in my world, it's not a deal till it's signed.
But it's signed, and we've sat
why
in
is
that
it
room,
asking for your
Councillor, we
signature
sat in that
tonight?
room back there. I was
agree.
given direction to, because we even gave you the date that this was going on. And I was given direction that I could sign this. And I did that.
We just heard from the
So
clerk.
it comes out of that room being approved into here to come to public.
Okay, so we've heard from the clerk, who says that it can be deferred. We've heard from the CAO to give us two options of how to do it. And the staff report, though, does say, right, for your signature. I'm just quoting two people and the letter. That's what I'm quoting.
I know.
I'm not making it up.
I know you're not.
So I think, just
Mr. CAO.
So we have to deal with it as item 5 or whatever it is on the agenda. It has to be voted down, voted yes, or referred or deferred. I think that, so it was signed, and that signing is legal. It was approved in a closed session, and I guess, sort of a closed session 101 type situation. Some things we talk about in closed session as a council and staff, and they don't see the light of day. A personnel matter, a legal opinion on how to act, or some course of conduct to undertake. But some things can and do see the light of day, and this was the method that we had for this item to see the light of day and to be brought to open council. So the direction that was given, so in closed session you can't make decisions, but you can make staff direction, and staff was directed to get the mayor to sign this and forward it on to the other municipalities and so on. And that took place, and that's legitimate. That was legitimately approved.
Okay.
This is the manner in which we're bringing this forward for what I think is the proper openness and transparency of letting it see the light of day in an open council meeting. Having said that, there's questions before council's prepared to do that. I think that those questions need to be answered probably in a closed session, because there again, subject to legal advice, subject to property acquisitions, potential property acquisitions, and so on. So I think the best method of doing that would say, let's refer this back to staff to bring back to council with a delegation from the Hamilton Port Authority, and then we'll bring it back into we'll answer those questions in closed session and bring it back to open session for the light of day piece that we want to do in the interest of openness and transparency.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that a council member make a motion to refer it to staff.
So it can't be these two, or this councillor, because we already talked about it.
That's fine.
I'll take Councillor Bagu. Councillor Bodnar, would you second that?
I would do it.
Thank you. So I've got Councillor Bodnar or Councillor Bagu and then Councillor Bodnar. Move that we refer it to staff so that we can hold an in-camera meeting. We will invite the MP and the general manager of HOPA to an in-camera meeting. So there are no discussions on that. And that'll be done as soon as we can have both Mr. Long and Mr. Louis contact those parties and set up a time with an in-camera meeting, which I would suggest we do on an off Monday where there's nothing else, because I think we'll have lots of questions. So yeah, don't tie it in with something else. Okay, so staff will be back to council with regards to that date. Is that fine with council? Is that okay with you guys on the line? Okay. All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Great, thank you. And that's it for the items. Oh my gosh.
8:30, 7, not bad.
Yep. Next is proclamations, and I'm going to actually read the proclamation. This is moved by Councillor Bodnar, seconded by Councillor Desmarais, that I, Mayor William C. Steele, do hereby proclaim October the 30th, 2020 to November 11th, 2020 as Poppy Week in the city of Port Colborne in honor of the men and women from Port Colborne who gave their lives during the 2 World Wars, the Korean War, and the Afghanistan War. Any questions to that? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. And that's unanimous. There are no minutes of boards, commissions, or committees. Consideration of bylaws, Madam Clerk.
There are 3 bylaws this evening, 6824-74-20 to 6826-76-20.
I have Councillor Wells, Councillor Dance to move that. Any questions on any of the bylaws? Seeing none, please raise your hand. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Council. And before we adjourn, again, please pay attention to our social media and our city's website with regards to any changes specifically to Halloween. That was brought up by Councillor Kalaloff, and our staff will be working on that, our communication staff. So please keep an eye on that. Again, please stay safe out there, and have a good rest of your week, people. We're adjourned.